big can of worms for safety management in the workplace, safety management in your home, who's responsible, all those sorts of things. And it just absolutely fascinates me. And I think what Faith does is so important to educate the workers in the workplace, the owners, the directors, whomever it may be, to understand that they need to cover their backsides. There's processes and procedures that need to be carried out for everything that you do in your workplace, whether you work on your own and you have an outlet where people come and go from. If you're working in your home and you're working for yourself, it's a little bit different, but you still have to have those risk management plans in place just in case something goes wrong. Is that right, Faith?
Yeah, definitely. Risk is all around us, whether you're in the workplace, whether you're at home, there's risk around you, and you always have to be aware of it, to prevent that accident.
The thing that comes to mind here is that we look at our children and we say, don't do that, you'll hurt yourself. But we don't give them the opportunity to do it and see what the consequence is so that they won't do it again. So there's a learning process in everything that we do. Maybe that risk management stems from our childhood and the protection that we've had from, don't do that, Johnny, because you'll hurt yourself. Don't step on there because you might fall over and hurt yourself. You can't ride your bike without your training wheels because you might tip yourself over. All these sorts of things that us as parents are trying to protect our children from being injured or hurt. But we have to learn somehow, don't we?
Yes, and how do you do it in a way that children will learn and understand what risk is and how to look out for it?
And what they've got to look out for the consequences of what happens if this happens. The consequence is this. What does it cost? How much insurance am I going to be charged for? The fines that you get for not doing the right thing. There is so much. It is, can I say, complicated? But you going into the workplace, Faith, having conversations with these people is a must. It is totally necessary, and every workplace needs people like you.
Yes, and I like the way you're talking about consequences, because often, like you're talking about risk, but, we're talking about children, but even if you look in the adult world, they're not looking out for the risk. And when you point that out, or either they're not taking it seriously. And that's why when I'm speaking to people, I say, you need to know, when I'm working with my clients, I tell them about the how, the why, and the consequences. If they don't have the consequences, they're less likely to follow the procedures.
And those consequences, you can tell them they can be huge. You can lose your business over it.
Yes.
If you haven't got that risk management in place, you could lose your business if someone gets injured. And that is the biggest consequence. And nobody wants that, because you start a business to make money, to grow and do what you're passionate about 99% of the time. You don't want to lose your business over lack of risk management.
And the thing is, when someone's building a business, they put so much into it, their time, their effort, and to bring it to a point where it's profitable or where it's running efficiently, there's been such a big effort. And just that one unforeseeable incident can change that in a split second.
Yeah. And it can be just a split second. And your world is just turned upside down and inside out sometimes.
Yes.
And so the consequence can be massive. The consequence can be, okay, I'm not going to let that happen again. So let's get the safety management processes and procedures in place so it never happens, or the risk is so minimal you can manage it.
Yes. And talking about what I always say is, once an incident or an injury has occurred, it's irreversible. You can't go back.
That is so true. It
You
is
can't go back.
irreversible. Yeah. Yeah.
And most times, like with any injury, even if it's a small injury, you still have some form of permanent disability. So even if you sprain your ankle, eventually it's going to become arthritic. Over time, it's going to be sore. It's going to have, swell. It's cause your foot to swell. It's going to do all those things. So every injury or incident has a consequence that's irreversible.
I slipped off a rock, which was about 4 inches from the sand. And now I have a plate and 7 screws in my ankle.
Wow.
Such a simple, easy thing to do. I don't have pain or anything, but there could be the arthritis come along and all these sorts of things. But it's really interesting when you are looking at risk and risk management and how it can be prevented or minimalized.
Yes.
to the smallest of risks.
Yes.
So what would you say to people who are listening, the listeners out there, if they're in business, if they're, go to work, because most of them would be working, or they'd have children, they go to school and pick up and do all that sort of thing, drop-offs, there's a risk management process in all of that. What would you say to them?
I think is really the first thing you really need to sort of sit and think about is that everything has risk.
Everything.
Even if we wake up in the morning, what is the first thing you do? You look out there and see, is it raining?
Yeah,
is
you
it cold?
do.
Is it hot? And that will determine how you dress. If it's raining out there, you're going to think, okay, I probably need to add another 10 minutes to my drive to work, or to drop off the kids, or, the risk is there all of the time. And you really need to think about it.
Mm. So when you walk into a workplace and you start the conversation, what kind of responses do you get? Because I would say there's a lot of ignorance, not intentionally ignorant, but there is ignorance there. And you are having the conversations with maybe the owner or the employer, and then you have conversations with the employees. What is it? What's the responses that you get?
I'm fortunate in that when a client calls me to help them, they're open to listening, because they are serious about workplace safety. That is one of the things I'm so fortunate to have. So in our conversations, there's never a time where they've, been anti something. It's like, I want to learn, I want to know about this thing. So yes, they, like initially when they're looking at the manuals, it's like, it's not making sense. That's why we've called you in. So when I work with my clients, usually it's a 10-step process to get them up and running to a place where their safety systems and processes are in place. But the good part of it is, by the time we get to the 4th session, and as I told you, I mentor and coach as I'm going along the way, you just see the spark in their eyes where it's like, oh, I get it.
Mm.
And then they start rattling off, oh, yes, this happened. What about this? What about that? And that is just the most, I can't explain it to you, but it's just the best moment ever.
Exciting.
Exciting. They got it. They got it.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's why my work is so satisfying, because the clients call me in because they are willing to make that change. They're willing to learn.
And most places would have a safety management process of some kind, but if they went to read it, it's kind of boring stuff, but it's essential to understand and know the processes and procedures, regardless of how boring it is.
Yes.
So that they have that the risks managed to a certain degree, I suppose you could say.
Yes. So when I'm working with my clients, my goal is concise, to the point. Whatever procedure I put in place, I have to think about, okay, someone doing this job has a certain level of competence. What do they need to do? I want them to walk in there and be able to take that document and be able to follow through and read it. So I work on making sure it's concise, it's to the point. I try and put it onto one page and no more.
And that is really important, isn't it? Because then they can make reference to the other information. You've got the conciseness, if I could say that word, there on that one sheet. So it's a reference point for them, but then their reference point can go into more meaningful reading and understanding if it's needed.
Yes.
And that's how important it is to being concise and to the point and making sure that they understand it, but also having those procedures and everything in the background so that they can make reference to them if they need them. Faith, we're coming toward the end of the show, and what would you say to businesses out there? They can be one-man bands, they can have people, okay, if they work from home, they work with virtual assistants, what is their responsibility, all that sort of stuff. I think you need to come back and we can talk more about those things. But what is the responsibility of the owner of the business? I'll say the owner of the business or the principal person within the business. What's their overarching responsibility?
What they need to realize is basically, no matter what size of the business it is, whatever role they're in, if they are the owner or the director or the CEO of the business, they have a duty of care. They have an obligation under the legislation. The legislation says that they must do all that is reasonable and practicable to ensure safety in the workplace. And even if they are a worker, they must not harm themselves or others. So that obligation falls on anyone that is in a business. So, if you think, oh, well, it's just me in the business, but you are going to still associate with business colleagues, with your clients, with callers to your business, all of that. And you have a responsibility to that.
Mm.
So you really have to do your due diligence and make sure you are up to date with the legislation. You need to understand the risk within your business. Even if you're a one-man band, what is the risk? I had a lady that was, at the time, she was a lawyer, and she was just doing mobile services. But she was walking into clients' environments, doing their wills, etc. And what happened is that one of her clients assaulted her. So you have to think beyond of that. So that conversation with someone like myself is so important, because we can then question you in a specific way so that you can then understand what risks involved and what steps you need to do to ensure that, one, you're compliant with the legislation, you're meeting your obligations, and you're ensuring your own safety and safety of others.
Yeah. And number one, you've got to protect yourself. And you've said a couple of times that people that have gone into places, real estate and other places, that their safety hasn't been there. They've been abused and things like that. So I think we don't think about those things until something happens. And then, it's